Hello and welcome to Calibre Conversations, where we chat to a range of authors and speakers as part of our online book festival to celebrate our 50th year. My name is Emma and I'm joined by Mark, a Calibre supporter and volunteer, and we are absolutely thrilled to be chatting to best-selling and award-winning author Lisa Jewell, whose latest novel, None of This Is True, has recently won the Fiction Audiobook of the Year and the Crime Novel of the Year at the 2024 British Book Awards, as well as winning Crime Book of the Year at the 2024 Fingerprint Awards, which are chosen by readers and celebrate excellence in international crime and thriller writing. So first of all, hello and a big welcome to you, Lisa, and massive congratulations to you on your awards. Have you had to clear a shelf at home to display them all?
Yes, I haven't, but I'm gonna have to because at the moment I've just shoved them in front of my cookbooks in the kitchen. So if I actually need to get to any of my cookbooks, I'm gonna have to move all of my awards out of the way to get to them. So and I have got another couple of shortlists coming up as well over the summer. So maybe by the end of the summer I'll have a couple more, in which case, yeah, definitely gonna have to build a new shelf.
So yeah, I was going to say you'd have to definitely have a new shelf for all of those. That's fantastic. Well done on all of that. Very well deserved, might I say as well. But can I just wonder if we can just start and take you back to the beginning? So just over 25 years ago, you had I think it's fair to say a bit of an unusual start to your writing career. You were made redundant. And a friend challenged you to write 3 chapters of a book, which I think was in exchange for dinner at a favourite restaurant. It's brilliant. So, and you met the challenge, finished the book, which was subsequently published as Ralph's Party and became Britain's best-selling debut novel. Now, did you ever imagine that challenge would lead to this outcome when you were writing it? And did your friend ever challenge you to anything else after that?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I absolutely didn't. And what happened when Ralph's Party came out was mind-blowing. It felt unreal. I genuinely thought that I was living in some sort of parallel universe and I was going to come back to Earth at any point and someone was going to tell me it was all a dream. Um, and it was kind of 2 years of very heightened experience. Not every debut novelist gets the experience that I had when their first book comes out. So it was absolutely extraordinary. But I think what's even more extraordinary is what's happening now at the other end of that 25-year period, because it kind of went a bit quieter in the middle. And I was writing a book every year and publishing a book every year. And I had a really good solid readership, but all the exciting stuff stopped happening. So for me, it's like I've had 2 little miracles. I've had the miracle of my debut experience, and then I've had this miracle, which is 25 years into my career, halfway through my 50s, and all, just sort of bucket list, tick list things happening on a daily basis. It's extraordinary the way my career has exploded in the last few years. So yes, absolutely incredible on both counts. As for Yasmin, my friend who made me that original bet, no, she hasn't. She has not, but she is Yasmin she's gone from being a journalist, which is what she was when she made me that bet back in 1996, to being an astrologist. So she
That's
does
quite a
got,
career change.
it's a huge career change. And she's very successful. And she does, I don't particularly subscribe to astrology, but she definitely uses some sort of guidance techniques on me yeah, she's been following my career ever since, definitely.
I, I take it during that time she didn't predict that you'd write another 20 novels, sell more than 10 million copies, and be translated into 30 languages.
She might have if I'd asked her.
But over the years, your approach has changed. I think if your choice of genres evolved in the sense of going back to say to 31 Dream Street, that won the, if I remember right, the Melissa Nathan Comedy Romance Award, and now we've got None of This Is True, which is a very dark psychological thriller. What happened along the way?
Well, it's actually more interesting is what happened right at the beginning, because I had to, we just republished Ralph's Party to celebrate its 25th anniversary. And the editor at Penguin, who republished it for us, asked me if I could unearth some press cuttings and sort of paraphernalia from the time that it came out. And while I was going through my box of press cuttings from 1999, I found my original synopsis for Ralph's Party, which I'd written to send when I wrote my 3 chapters. I hadn't written the rest of the book. I'd only written 3 chapters, which I then sent out to agents with a covering letter and this synopsis. And of course, the synopsis was based on absolutely nothing because I hadn't written the rest of the book. And which you absolutely shouldn't do if anybody's listening who's planning on submitting a book to agents. You really should write the whole book first. And the synopsis I wrote for Ralph's Party was a synopsis for a thriller. So it's about these flatmates called Ralph and Jem and Smith. And in my synopsis, Ralph becomes psychotically obsessed with Jem and then ends up like keeping her prisoner or something. But so that's the interesting thing is I'd set out to write a psychological thriller all the way back then in the 90s. But just because of where I was in my headspace at that time, in my life, my personal life, and all the cultural influences that were swirling around, I was living in London in the 90s. It was just everything was happening culturally speaking. So I ended up writing this book that was very of its moment, very zeitgeisty, so and very funny and very feel good. So I guess from that point of view, I was just always kind of gradually, incrementally with each book, getting myself closer and closer and closer to where I'd originally thought I was going to start my writing career. So yeah, it was I didn't do that sort of waking up one morning and thinking I don't want to write in this genre anymore. I just gradually, step by step, moved away from the romance and the comedy and moved into darker and darker themes, hoping that nobody would tell me to stop, and nobody did ever tell me to stop. My readers didn't tell me to stop. My publishers didn't tell me to stop. And so now I'm kind of where I was always supposed to be, I think, with these very dark books.
Well, none of this is true. Is most definitely in that psychological thriller genre, and critics have described it as the most original and twisted thriller I've read this decade. So dark and so clever, breathtaking, to quote just a few. So your fans won't be surprised either by those plaudits or the darkness of the plot. But the book seems to have taken you seriously out of your comfort zone. You wrote much faster than usual, without some of the features of other books, and confessed that a third of the way through that you were feeling dizzy with uncertainty and fear. So just what was going on there, and how did you find your way through that and navigating that?
Well, actually, and if you've read the acknowledgements, I do mention this because I was writing it so quickly, and like you mentioned, I normally have these very similar sort of structures and themes that run through my books. I usually have 3 or 4 points of view. I usually have a male point of view, a teenage or child's point of view. I normally have 2 different timelines. My books are usually very complex in that way. But this was just 2 women in one timeline in one small corner of London, basically talking to each other. And so it was very different from me. Because it was so much less complex than my books usually are, I was writing it much more quickly. And I wasn't sure it was going to please my readers, and I wasn't sure it was delivering on what my readers normally expect from my books. And I was really nervous that it was too slight, which seems ironic now. And I gave it to a writer friend of mine. He's a guy called Will Brooker, who wrote a book about me 2 years ago, where he shadowed me for a year writing The Family Remains. And I sent, because he was so intimately involved with the writing of that book, I feel very comfortable showing him my work in progress still to this day. And I am doing it with the book that I'm writing at the moment as well. And he just said, I don't know what's going on, but it's bleep delicious. And I just thought, that's it. That's all I need to know. He doesn't need to know what's going on. He's just enjoying it, and he's described it as delicious. And I thought he just absolutely boosted my confidence, and then I just sailed on with it.
During the book, the tension and a really palpable sense of menace grow ever sharper as the plot unfolds and the reader is drawn ever deeper into the different worlds of Alex and Josie. Writing the book took you 7 months, which is faster than your usual. But how did you maintain in your own mind that ever-present tension and the unfolding darkness?
I think it's because I'm very much at the extreme end of the plotting versus not plotting scale. And I come to a book with barely anything. So every time I sit down at my computer, I'm coming to the book with a sense of what might happen today. I haven't got a bigger picture in mind. And quite often I've only decided about what I'm going to write about that day. Possibly I decided in the shower that morning, or possibly I haven't decided at all when I sit down to write. And then I force myself to start typing words because that's my job. And if I don't type words, then the book's not going to get written. So every day was just me pushing this dynamic between these two women who didn't know each other, but who wanted to know everything there was to know about each other, and pushing it onto the page and just discovering things for myself, particularly with Josie. Obviously, she's the one with the dark story to tell, although Josie does find out dark things about Alex's life during their conversations too. So it just came from that. It came from me not knowing anything either, and kind of being in the same situation as the reader is when they're reading. Like, what on earth is Josie going to say next? Is what Josie, I didn't know half the time whether the story that Josie was telling Alex was the truth or not. I had no idea. I was being played just as much as Alex was being played, and just as much as the reader is being played. And I had to, it was only when I got to the end of the book that I could actually make sense of it all and put my own take, my own authorly take on what was true and what wasn't. But that doesn't mean that other readers' takes on what was true and what wasn't aren't also true, because that's what the book is about. It's about that, the slippery nature of truth. So yeah, I've got my own take, but other people have a different opinion.
In reading your books, I always feel that your characters are just so, to me, they're so real. I get to the end of the book and actually I can't believe I've just read fiction. They absolutely jump off the page. And just as that, I just wonder, do you ever struggle to control your characters, and that you've got an idea of a direction that you want to take them in, and how, obviously how they'd act in certain situations, but then as the plot develops, it kind of demands that they evolve and take a different path?
I never would try to control my characters because I really genuinely don't have a sense of who they should be or what they're capable of. I've written many characters with a sort of half-baked sense that they might be about to kill someone, because I know that someone's dead. It's often alluded to at the beginning, or stated at the beginning of one of our books, that someone is dead, and I haven't at that stage yet decided who killed them. Sometimes I haven't even decided who's dead. So I'm always leaving space for my characters to either prove themselves to be incapable of the dark acts that I had set them up to possibly be capable of, or capable of dark acts that I really didn't think they'd be capable of. So I'm always leaving them that free rein to be, and that's kind of what makes the plot so addictive and feel so twisty, is because I don't have any control over my characters. I just let them show me what sort of people they are, which means that they can sometimes do things that I wasn't expecting, and thus that the reader wasn't expecting, and then the reader thinks I'm just really good at writing twists into my books, but I'm not. It's just that's just the nature of the way I write.
But did the inspiration? Where did the inspiration of the 45th birthday twins come from?
That's when you're writing regularly a novel a year, your ideas sometimes come to you that make you think, oh, that could be something fun to write about. But quite often you forget about them because there wasn't enough sort of substance behind that idea, and you couldn't think of anything to marry it up with to give it more substance. And I'd had just had that idea years ago, and I can't even remember the genesis of the moment of just thinking, isn't that interesting that two people could be born on the same day in the same place and yet go on to live completely? Is that nature versus nurture thing? I'd like to write about that one day, but it just seemed a bit flimsy. Didn't really feel like it had an awful lot that I could pin onto it in terms of a gripping story. So this was just, I thought this would be a good way of bringing these two very disparate characters together, was if I gave them this like commonality, which doesn't really mean anything, but it was a good way to get the two characters to join up. And it's also interesting in terms of showing the differences between the two characters, because they're both 45, which I think is a very interesting age for women. But can also be, women can be at such completely different stages of their lives as well when they're 45, which was another really good chance to show the differences between them. One of them's got primary school age children, the other one's children, she's basically living in an empty nest. Her children are grown up. So there was a lot to play with in that. But yeah, that was a very old idea that I finally found a home for. Let's put it that way.
Now, None of This Is True is available as an audiobook, and it's an absolute masterclass in audio production. It's expertly narrated with the podcast extracts that are cleverly intertwined into the story, making even more of an impact in audio and really bringing the story to life in a different way. Do you have any involvement at all in creating the audio to any of your books? And if so, are there things that you've learned or things that have surprised you about the process at all?
No, I haven't really had that much creative input. I mean, certainly at the beginning of my career, nobody ever talked about audio. Audio was something that happened over there. And I didn't know anything about. I would get sent the audio, a set of CDs, in fact, back in the day, of the audio, and I didn't know who the voice actor was. I hadn't been involved in any aspect of it. They quite often even had different artwork on the covers because they were so separate from the published book. And as we know, audio has become a huge market. And the bigger the market has become, of course, the more my traditional publishers have wanted to be involved in how that product goes out into the world. And because I have a very close working relationship with my publishing team, my editor and the audio editor do involve me in looking at voice actors' clips. That's about as far as I get involved. So they'll send me, say, 3 or 4 actors that they're thinking of for a particular character and ask me which one I think works the best. But certainly when I delivered None of This Is True to my editor, who then passed it on to the audio team, I didn't have to suggest anything. They were in raptures. The minute they read the book, they absolutely knew exactly how they were going to do this. They've told me it was the most fun they've had producing an audiobook because there were so many sort of like tricksy things that they could do with it, so many clever things, new things as well, things that they'd never done before. So no, I didn't have any input into that. I just sat back and watched it all happen. Just thought, wow, this is so clever and so brilliant.
But did you, on the credits, it's got you as a credit as a narrator. Did you have a cameo in it?
I have a little cameo in it. And you know what? When I was listening to the audiobook, which this is the only one of my audiobooks I've ever listened to because I usually feel a bit cringy about listening to people reading my words. But so many people were raving about the quality of this audio production. I thought, I'm going to listen to the first couple of chapters, and I got sucked in and ended up listening to the whole thing. And I got so sucked in by it that I didn't actually recognize my own voice when my cameo came up until halfway through my cameo. And I suddenly thought, oh, that's me. So yes, I play a BBC reporter who's on the banks of Lake Windermere in the Lake District, reporting on something terrible that's just happened.
I got it right. That's who I thought you were. It's brilliant. It's absolutely, it is. I strongly urge anybody to source it out because it's just it just shows everything you can do in audio, and it fits so well with the theme of the book with the podcast interspersed. It's made for audio really. So they did such a clever job on it.
Thank you. Yes, it's brilliant. I couldn't be happier with the way it turned out.
Now, just going on to your latest project, which I have to say I'm beyond excited about as a Marvel fan. So your next book is called Breaking the Dark, which again is another departure really from what you've been used to. It's the first book in a brand new Marvel crime series featuring characters from the Marvel comic books, and it's actually written by a series of authors, and yours is the first one that's coming out, I believe. And I think it's based on Jessica Jones, Marvel character. So what attracted you to that project in the first place?
There were so many things that attracted me to it, one of which was the finances of it, because it's intellectual property, I think, that or original, I can't remember. There's some terminology which means that I don't own the rights to the book, which means that I can't make royalties. So given that I would normally make a lot of money on one of my books through royalties, they had to attract me by offering me a certain amount of money to write the book and then say goodbye to it and like, send it off into the Marvel universe. And so that was, I'm a family woman. I've got bills to pay. So that was very attractive. But more attractive than that was the unexpectedness of it. The idea that there are, I don't know how many hundreds of female crime writers in the world, brilliant female crime writers, who could have been offered this opportunity to write. And it's the inaugural book. It's the first book in a series. It's going to be quite a high profile series. They're using some incredibly stellar names in the series. And the fact they came to me, I just thought, wow, that's how can I say no? And, I'm not a Marvel fan. I'm not supposed to say that, by the way. I have not traditionally been a Marvel fan, but I am a Jessica Jones fan. And yeah, I just thought it's the biggest pop cultural canon in the world. And now I've going to have my little place in it. And it just seemed like one of those unmissable opportunities. I also thought it would be fun. That's the third reason why I said yes, because I thought this is going to be so much fun. I love Jessica Jones. And I was wrong about it being fun. It was not fun. It was the hardest book I've ever written. Um, particularly coming off the back of writing None of This Is True, which was such a joy to write. Yeah, so all in all, it's been an incredible experience, and I'm really, really, really glad that I agreed to do it. But it was much more challenging than I thought it would be.
I think potentially you could bring it to a new audience as well, though, a new readership, because obviously that's what's so great about it.
Yes, well, that's kind of the other, I guess. Yes, that's a fourth reason to say yes, is the fact that all writers want to expand their readership, and all publishers want to expand their authors' readerships, and this is a very, very good way of doing that. Heaven knows what the Marvel fans who have never heard of Lisa Jewell will make of it. I really hope they like it. So far, I've only had feedback from Lisa Jewell readers who are all being incredibly lovely about it and very enthusiastic. But there's a bit in it that just thinks, oh well, they're just saying that because they love my books. They would say that about anything I wrote. They're just being kind. So once it gets out into the world, and the Marvel fans who don't care a jot about Lisa Jewell start reading it, then I might get different feedback. So I'm sort of girding my loins for that, because I know that they're a very, very particular crowd, the Marvel crowd. Hard to please.
Was that very daunting, knowing that there are millions of people out there who already have a vision in their own minds of Jennifer Jones, and that you're trying to create something that corresponds to that, but is in some sense part of you as well?
Yeah, no, there very much was. So, I mean, I was very familiar with her character from the Netflix show. So there were 3 seasons of a Jessica Jones Netflix show. So they'd already reimagined a character who used to be a cartoon character onto the screen. So I was coming at it the third way. So mine is with the third imagining of Jessica Jones. And I actually based my imagining of Jessica Jones on the comic book version of her. Because otherwise I thought this is just going to get diluted and diluted and diluted if we just keep sort of being inspired by the iteration that came before. So I very much took my inspiration from the comic book and felt like I was very loyal and true to the original writer's take on the character. But yeah, I do feel there is a lot of pressure. I'm going to try not to let it get to me and just hope for the best.
I think I'm right in thinking that none of your books has either been made into a film or adapted for television, which is quite a surprise. Is this something you'd think about if you were approached?
Well, I'm approached all the time. This is the frustrating nature of the film and TV industries. Pretty much every book I've ever written has been optioned by a hugely enthusiastic TV or film production company who tell me that it's always going. They have all these marvelous plans and they know exactly how they've got these visions. And I get a little bit of money every time you sell an option to one of your books. They give you a little bit of money, which means they get to hold on to the rights of the book for a year. If by the end of that year they haven't gone into production, then the option reverts back to me, and then I'm free to sell on the book again. Some of my books have been through 2 or 3 different production companies over the years, none of whom have managed to get it to the production stage. So no, I'm constantly approached and I'm constantly built up into this froth of excitement to the point where I've actually become quite cynical now. So None of This Is True has been signed up by Netflix. For obvious reasons, it's been signed up by Netflix, since that's a running theme of the book, that there's this Netflix documentary running through the book. And I announced it on my social media on Monday, and all my readers got very, very, very excited. And I'm sort of sitting there watching it all, trying to temper it down, saying, we don't know, it's not been made yet, nothing's happened yet, it might never happen. I can't. I will believe it when I'm sitting there in a red velvet seat in a cinema watching it. Up until then, I'm going to be very just calm.
Oh, that surely has to be made though.
It does have to
Surely,
be. Wouldn't it be
surely.
awful if it didn't? Wouldn't it be awful if Netflix bought the rights to my
Yeah.
book about a Netflix documentary and then didn't make it? So
No, fingers crossed. That's this got to make it, that one, definitely. I'll certainly be watching that. So just to find out a little bit about you now, Lisa, really. So other than your incredible writing talent, do you have any other hidden talents or interests or hobbies that people might not know about?
no, I always feel like I'm something compared to my contemporaries and my friends and my peer group of writers. I always feel like I'm the BTEC version. Like they've all gone to amazing universities and got incredible degrees, and they can play the piano and speak numerous languages, and they have all these um self-improving hobbies and plans as well for beyond their lives beyond writing. And I am none of those things. I didn't go to university. I did a BTEC in fashion promotion. And I have no hobbies. I do nothing to improve myself. I walk the dog for an hour and a half every day. I watch a lot of television. I stare at my phone a lot. I used to be really into cooking, but I hardly cook anymore. No, I don't have anything, which is why when readers write to me and say, please never stop writing, I say, well, I can't stop writing because there's nothing, I have got nothing else to do if I stop writing. I would just spend 12 hours a day staring at my phone. So I can't stop writing because it's the only thing I do. So no, I don't have any other interesting hobbies or skills or talents. No.
But as well as the writing, do you do any reading? Have you got a favourite author or a favourite book you could recommend to other people?
I used to be a voracious reader, and then something happened to me during the COVID years, which I think is when my phone addiction really kicked in during the COVID years. And it kind of broke my stride really with being a person who read sort of 30 or 40 books a year. And I've ground down to reading maybe one book a month. But in the last 6 to 8 months, in fact, as a direct result of listening to None of This Is True on audio, which I hadn't, like I say, I hadn't listened to any of my books on audio before, and I certainly hadn't listened to anybody else's books on audio. I used to listen to true crime podcasts and what have you. So I've now come back to reading through the medium of audio, which I love. So it now means I'm back to 30 or 40 books a year. I'm just not reading them, I'm listening to them. In terms of books that I would recommend, particularly to people who like my books and read in my genre, I think my favorite psychological thriller is called The Stopped Heart by Julie Meyerson. I love a book called Lie With Me by Sabine Durrant. Um, and yeah, I love Joanna Briscoe. I love all my contemporary writers as well. The current crop of female psychological thriller writers, Ruth Ware and Claire McIntosh and Gillian McAllister. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
Thanks very much.
Lisa, it's just been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, and I urge anyone who's listening to this who's not yet discovered your books to go out immediately and seek them out. Both Mark and I love None of This Is True, I think it's fair to say, and I personally am going to say it's the best book I've read so far this year. We are absolutely thrilled to have the audiobook in our collection for our members to borrow, along with many of your other titles, and I'm actually quite jealous of those who will be discovering your books for the first time, as I know what a treat they've got in store. So yeah, I hope they're going to love finding out your books and reading them. So that only leaves me to say a really big thank you to you, Lisa, for joining us today. So thank you very much.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for having me.